Okay, so this is a consult walkthrough video. The intent of this video is to give you more of the general context for my program, how it kind of looks and how it kind of works. A little bit of how it came to be, because that has a lot to do with why it works so well, and what you can expect on a bigger level. So this should be the first video that you are watching as part of your consult. You will also receive another video, or in some rare cases, you might have received an email that explains your recommendations. Hopefully you received a video. I'm kind of transitioning the consult process right now and hoping that I have the amount of time that I think and hope I have to kind of make these more dynamic. So this video will be standardized so that I don't delay all of my consult times by having to repeat this general stuff over and over and over. This is intended to be watched first. So you received several things. One of the things that you received is an attachment. There should be 2 attachments, maybe possibly 3, depending on your situation. And they're all kind of packets. They're all multi-page documents. One of them is completely your personal plans, your recommendations, ways that you can do this. Of course, the general context that's going to be provided in this video is going to help a lot with understanding the context for those plans. And then your personal video will talk more specifically about your situation, the responses that you sent me about your situation and your goals, and how those fit with the plans. So that document probably has a weird name that's like CCF and then today's date, or whatever date I scanned it on. There's another document called Important Program Info, and it is exactly that. It is very important info about the program. That document goes into a lot of the technical details, so that is a very important document that has a very different use and importance to you than this video and the second video. So when you have had a chance to watch this video and your personal video, and you've had a chance to look over the plans, which you'll do either right before, during, or right after you do your personal video, then you can read through that, because that gives you more info on very specific things like, how do I place my order? What information needs to be included with it? How am I actually going to go about this, and when, and how do I start? And once all this stuff shows up in my inbox because I just bought my classes, what do I do with it, and how do I use it, and in what order should I do things? How can I get the most out of classes? What are the do's and don'ts of really maximizing this program versus kind of getting something out of this program? Everything I just listed is like a page of that packet. So it's several pages. There's tons and tons of info in there, and it's very detailed. So really you need to have an idea, a picture in your head of what this looks like and how it's going to work, and what the general layout looks like, and what you're going to be expecting to do on a broader scale first. Then the detailed stuff will make sense. That said, I am very fortunate, I guess, in the sense that I have kind of stumbled on the perfect place for me, as far as not just my career in general, but as far as exactly what I do, which is specializing into entrance exams and into getting students into nursing school. But what comes with that territory is, for whatever reason, there is not really another tutor or another educator or another program that really works with the T's and the HESI the way that I do. And my goal is to put out the absolute best content and strategies and skills, and to give you a really clear idea of what the writers of your test actually really want when they go to decide which answer choice is the correct answer choice. How do they make that decision? What are the tricks that are built into it? As I've designed my program that way, and as I've devoted myself and my energy and my time to creating a program that is that specific and that accurate, in turn has made my program very, very effective and very, very efficient. And with that has come just an incredible volume of students that I work with on a regular basis. And the reason that I point that out is because the info that's included in that information packet will help to ensure that you have all the info included that you need to include when you send me something, to make sure I can process it as quickly as possible, so that you don't send me a request and then there's a little bit more info that I need, so I've got to send you back a question and it delays my response to you. And again, you kind of have to have a bit of context for the info packet to make sense. I just ask that before you go to place that first order, that you really look through that packet. There's a specific page about how to place an order and what information needs to be in your email, so that the second that I or my assistant see the email, we have everything that we need and we're instantly ready to get you out your content, rather than having to do a clarification that delays us by a few hours. I also separately, as far as reasons for the importance of that packet, I also believe you will get the very most out of your program and out of your time that you put into this and your money that you put into this if you read through all of the outlines that explain, when to print and how to do the class and how to engage in the class, and then what to do after the class and how to check your answers, and what to do if you check an answer and it doesn't turn out to be right. Just all of the details of, once you've got the content sitting in front of you, how do you get the very best score on your exam because you're using this content and because you've put the time and money into this. And there's tons of pages in that document. Each one of them has its own focus, and it'll be titled according to somewhat what that focus is. And I do ask that before you begin, you read through that thoroughly. You're more than welcome to read through the placing an order page and go ahead and place your order, since you may be waiting a bit to get your order out, and then go back and read the things like the do's and don'ts for ultimate success and the outline of when you use what and how all of that works and so on. I'm going to try to make this video as quick as I can without leaving anything out. The purpose of this video is to give you a very general picture of what the program looks like, how it's designed, and because a lot of you probably aren't expecting the design to look the way that it does, I will also provide some insight to how I came to this point and why, and very importantly, why it works. And some of you may not have actually formed a visual image of what you did expect the prep process to look like. I get a lot of messages from a lot of you that really do put your trust into me right from the front, and I appreciate that. That is humbling, but also a very positive thing, because I will not misplace your trust in making sure that my recommendations are what are going to take you to exactly where it is that you're trying to go, which we discussed in the initial part of the consult. So ultimately, you need to know before you start a program, it's actually very important that the person who you choose to guide you, if you choose a person to guide you, which obviously that's what you have chosen to do because you are here and you are seeing this, you need to know that you can trust that person, and that kind of requires a little bit of background and why should I trust this? Not only me as a person, but also the program and what you're going to be doing. And so I'm going to give you an idea of why I do it the way that I do it, and how that came to be, and why it works, and how well it tends to work, and what type of results basically you can end up expecting. So I will start with a background on me. Ultimately, this video is designed to outline you and your process, and how this is going to fit your process, and how this is going to be laid out in order to set you up to do what you've told me that you want to do. But to get to that point, I kind of have to give you the very quick Cliff Notes version of my background and how I came into this, because that's how the program came into existence. So I'm going to try to make a 13-year long history as short of a story as possible. I started tutoring 13 years ago. And when I say tutoring, I really mean tutoring. The typical tutor kind of has a lot of different things that they work with. You see people sometimes that are just a science tutor, but they work with all kinds of science classes, or they're just a standardized test tutor. But most standardized test tutors work with all of the different standardized tests. I shouldn't say all, but many of them. So you'll have a high school level standardized test tutor who works with ACT and SAT and ASVAB and things that are in that level group. When I started out, I actually started in anatomy and physiology. My intent when I started tutoring was to just support and help people who were in microbiology or anatomy or physiology or anatomy and physiology classes. So when I started out, I had a very narrow scope, and I really liked tutoring as soon as I started doing it. It was never something I would have imagined I would do and that I would be able to do. And it was also never something I knew I would like so much. And so when I started this, which was 13 years ago, and obviously I'm still here, I immediately fell in love with it. And to be successful as a tutor in the sense of getting enough business to make it worthwhile to be able to stay in tutoring, you kind of have to expand your subject base. And so I expanded many, many times. I started with expanding from the anatomy and the physiology and the microbiology to some of the other pre-nursing prerequisites that are required for nursing school. Then I started to move into some of the standardized tests. I wouldn't swear to it because this was a long time ago and I'm getting old. But I think the first standardized test I ever worked with was the ACT for high school students. Moved from that, of course, to SAT. And then I got actually really involved with the GED that you would take if you decided to stop going to high school, but you wanted to be able to go to college. And I just kept expanding and expanding and expanding. And at some point pretty early in my career, I ran across the T's. And started working with it. And at that point, I didn't know a whole lot about the T's. I certainly didn't know more about the T's than all of the other exams that I had branched out and started to teach. But I got, I would say, a fair amount of students here and there. And that was a very different time. Online was not a thing then. I lived in a very different area than where I live now. So it was totally different in terms of volume and context. But I would say that I saw somebody asking for help with T's fairly frequently, considering how much less I worked in tutoring then. And it's worth noting, especially for future reference as you go forward, it took me many years to have what it takes to be full-time in tutoring. It's a very, very, very low percentage of tutors can be full-time tutors, because it takes an unbelievable amount of a lot of different things, from commitment to versatility in all the different subjects to skill to just kind of everything, and a lot of risk. To be honest, it's very risky to go full-time in tutoring. And I always wanted to be full-time. I really wanted to work full-time in tutoring. I knew that within the first year that I started doing it. But I was working as everything from a CNA initially to an EMT to a paramedic. And eventually I actually had a full-time job in education working with the GED, all while building my skills and building my student base as a tutor. Eventually, I did go full-time. And as I said, that is a risk. So I kind of just eventually had to say, I love healthcare and I love so much about healthcare, but it wasn't really for me and it wasn't really what I wanted to do the rest of my life. And there wasn't really anything else I wanted to do. I tried a job in formal education, didn't love it, so I didn't want to do that. And eventually I just kind of had to make the leap. And when I did that, I just tutored every subject I possibly could. And again, it was a different time, so I drove to every student. There wasn't really an online function like what we have now. And that was something that really grew the tutoring industry and really grew my career when we did get that. But until we did, I just drove all over Dallas, which is very dangerous. And I mean, I would start at 10 a.m. and I would have high school biology and then maybe SAT and then maybe a GED student and then maybe a pre-nursing student who was doing anatomy. And at that time, I did have a fair amount of T's, and then I began to see HESI students at that time. So I was kind of all over the place. And for a long time, I did that. And I kind of realized eventually that the demand for T's and HESI was crazy. It was so much higher in demand than any other subject, than really all of the other subjects put together. And at some point, I realized that the incoming requests that I was getting for the T's or the HESI or some of the other entrance exams like the CAP or the NET I was getting more inquiries in just that little teeny area than all of my other subjects, which made up probably 60 some subjects that I was certified to teach. And that eventually caught my attention because that seemed kind of strange for a corner that small to need so much tutoring. And I did some research, long story short again, on why this was so prevalent as far as people looking for somebody specifically to help guide their prep process. And there were two major things I found. One was that the materials that are out there that are published that say right on there, this will prepare you for the T's, or this will prepare you for the HESI, all the way from the official materials that come from the actual writers of these exams down to publishers that are many, many, many steps below that, and everything in between was very inaccurate. So what I discovered is if you were a very smart and determined and committed student who wanted to score high on the T's or on the HESI, there wasn't really anything that you could buy that would give you that opportunity, because even the official books that come straight from ATI for the T's or Elsevier for the HESI were a combination of missing a lot of things, just not covering a good majority of the things that need to be covered, and then undershooting the difficulty. So between missing a ton of things that are on the test and teaching a lot of them, but not teaching them to anywhere near the advanced levels of difficulty that you might see them in when you do see the test, that leaves students coming up very, very short. And I kind of discovered as I continued to watch the different situations that were presented to me and the results, if you self-studied and you bought a few different books or an online module from ATI or practice tests from ATI, it doesn't matter what material we're talking about because it all has the same inherent issues. You would potentially be able to get maybe a little above the average, which is not all that good for these exams, but you couldn't really find enough accurate material to get you into the 80s or into the 90s, no matter how much money you were willing to spend on material, no matter how many different types of material, and no matter how good you are at studying and how smart you are and how committed you are. None of that mattered. And that was shocking to me because that's unusual in academics. Typically, students who are intelligent and willing to work hard, they can score whatever they want on a standardized exam. I noticed it's very different with T's and HESI. They're intentionally putting out material that does undershoot the test a lot. And there's multiple reasons for that. One of them is that that's the design of an entrance exam, is it is supposed to select a very small percentage of students. So when the schools use the entrance exams, they're effective because most people don't do well on them, and most people, despite efforts, cannot raise their score as high as maybe they need to, and that makes it just easy for the schools to say, oh, well, we only have 5 people that scored above 90, so those are our 5 people that get into our program. So the nature was part of it. The other part, unfortunately, is every time you take the T's, you pay ATI, or maybe your school pays ATI $100, And the more times they can have you take it, the more times they get that $100. And there seems to be an element of the profitability of making it elusive to get to where you're trying to go with this. So that was the first discovery. Terrible material, nothing really out there that was very accurate, that was in the right style and in the right language and in the right difficulty. Nothing really was out there that showed the different levels of difficulty, because you could get a very easy question about percentages or a very hard one, and there's 5 or 6 levels that are in between there. And to really do well, you need to study each one of those levels and know what level you're studying and have specific skills and strategies that go with that level. And then at the end of that, you can blend them together. So all of that was lacking. And that leads people to look for something different. So if I can't find a book that seems to help me get accurate study for the T's, my next step is probably going to be, are there maybe tutors or educators in some sense who are experts in these exams who could help me more than the materials that I've been able to get my hands on? And that was where I noticed the second problem in the T's and HESI market, is there really wasn't anybody who seemed excited about these exams, myself included at that time. Everybody's profile that comes up under a search for T's or for HESI is like, I work with it sometimes, or, I'm able to help with practice for it, more so than here's an entire preparation program. A lot of people's programs, or a lot of people's profile bios kind of said like, I did well on the T's as the educator, so now I teach it, which obviously you would hope that I could do well on the T's if I'm going to teach you about the T's. But in and of itself, that's not enough for me to say, oh, I do well on the T's. That's not enough for me to know for sure that I can help you do well on the T's, because there's a very big difference in teaching it versus just doing it yourself. And that was kind of what I saw. I saw a lot of, I'm certified in T's. I'll take T's students if I need to, but I'm really a specialist in something else. Or I've done well on the T's or the HESI, so I became a tutor for it. There was nobody whose profile was like, if you want to know exactly what you need to do really, really well on these exams, come to me. I will show you exactly the way. I will show you exactly how to do it. I'll take the guesswork out for you. I'll make it easy. And I would kind of consider that like a subject guru. And there was not one. And again, long story short, I decided at that point that I was going to make another risky move in my career and attempt to be the first person who cared that much. And knowing that the materials were really inaccurate, I knew that to succeed with that, I would need to be really thinking outside the box and probably putting in a lot of time and energy and effort and focus and a lot of creativity, as it turned out, to figure out how I was going to do that. Because it's one thing to say, I'm going to commit to T's, and it's another to say, okay, but you know that the books aren't accurate and the online modules aren't accurate and the practice tests aren't accurate. So how do you get the right info in front of your students if you have access to the same things that they do? And how I do all of this would be a very long story and totally beside the point. But I make it my mission now, and I made it my mission from the beginning, right after I made that decision to commit to nursing entrance specifically and to take my career completely into that specific specialization. I go totally and completely out of my way in so many different ways to get the right material in front of you. My curriculum, to say it simply, is based on the T's exam and or the HESI exam or whatever exam you're taking. There's different variations and there's different pieces of the classes that are committed to those different things. But I teach what's really possible on the test. I consider the test bank, the bank of possible questions and passages that you will see when you do take your test. And that's what I make my curriculum for. So I don't use, you'll see material sometimes that does come from some of the books that you might be familiar with, but you will see that it's altered because my focus is to be 100% accurate to the test that you're taking and not to the books or the modules or the things you might find on forums, which is frightening to think about. I completely base everything that I decide to say and how I decide to say it and what examples I use to showcase it and demonstrate it, and ultimately what practice I choose to put in front of you. Those are decisions made very carefully. Everything is put together meticulously, and all of that is with the intent of making sure you don't study anything that you don't need to study. You don't study underneath or above the difficulty level that you need to study in each specific little area, and that the material you're using is accurate. Throughout this process, once I kind of made the decision to go full-time in TEAS and HESI, it was a whirlwind couple of years, because as soon as I started specializing in those exams, I started to get better and better and better at getting results for my students, a lot more so than any other method or person was getting. And the word was kind of getting out there. There's a lot of word of mouth involved in this. And I was getting busier and busier and busier until I reached a point where I was the busiest tutor in the country. I'm still at that point. And I was the most requested tutor, both just nationwide, all subjects. And that shows you how many people need help with the TEAS and the HESI. Is I am the busiest tutor in the country as far as how many hours I put in with students. And I am the most requested tutor in the country, which tells you how many people are out there requesting TEAS and HESI specifically. And there still isn't anybody else who is a guru in this area. There are an occasional tutor or educator who kind of claims to be, but I can honestly say I always keep track of the market. There really isn't people who want to put all of their time and energy into finding out what's actually on the test, taking the test to simulate the experience their students have, and putting accurate, effective material in front of their students. So I continue to be the person who is kind of the pioneer of the TEAS and the HESI field. And I love it. I would not choose anything else. I absolutely love doing this, but it takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of commitment, and nobody else still to this day, even seeing that it is doable, really wants to do that. And that just drives me more because the test is constantly changing. The way that things are taught in the prereqs that kind of set your mentality up for testing, that's constantly changing. And for that reason, my curriculum is constantly changing. So what you get with this program is the most accurate, most up-to-date material for your test, strategically taught. I don't throw knowledge and information and content at you. What I do is I teach you how to strategically answer each and every question type. And there's tons of question types, and every question type has different variations and different styles that you can see it in, and lots of different difficulty levels. And you'll see all of them. You'll see some of the ones that would be considered easy and some that are considered extremely difficult. But to be successful with that, you need to have worked from the very basic level on every single one of those little things up to the advanced level, practicing everything that's in between, but ultimately coming out with a strategy. So as soon as you recognize this is a logical conclusion question, you have a logical conclusion strategy that you've been working with forever, that you know how to implement, that works for every logical conclusion question from the easiest to the hardest, and repeat that same thing I just said with lots and lots and lots of other question types, percentages, ratios, metric conversion, geometry, obviously anatomy and physiology are big ones, and there's questions over every single system. And so what I did for a long time was tutoring. I did private tutoring with every student who I could take on, and we would sit in a private lesson for 1 to 2 hours. I typically never do less than an hour and a half at a time. And what I kind of noticed was it's a lot of what I've come to call lecture. It's a lot of me relaying things to you that you need to know about what to expect from the questions, how to recognize them, how to implement a strategy for them, all the different ways that they can look. And with the TEAS and the HESI, it's not super interactive. So it's not like it doesn't teach well in a conversation format, because there's so many things that you need to be told and that you need to know, and then you need to practice, that it's very one-sided on my side. And as I had discovered that, I was also becoming so busy as far as inquiries that I could not take even a quarter of the students who sent me requests to work with me for the TEAS or the HESI. And that kind of caused me to accidentally stumble on what I do now, which is a very structured, very organized program that is put together in a particular way that ensures that you see every single thing, you see them in the best order you can see them in, you gain a strategy for every single thing, and you learn those strategies in groups that make sense to learn them in. And when you go from beginning to end doing exactly that and doing it for every single little thing, what you find is that you build a massive, massive empire of information and knowledge and skill and strategy. And that's how you succeed with TEAS and HESI. The current design that I use came from, or I should say started with, a realization that I was not able to take on nearly as many students as I needed to be able to make sure that people don't get left out in the cold. And the fact that it's a very lecture intensive arena. So I created the idea of basically a class where I would teach live all day, every day. I would teach all of my different classes that I teach in sort of a random rotating kind of order. And people would drop into classes whenever they could make it work in their schedule. And that got amazing results. In fact, switching from private tutoring where we sat here alone and discussed and lectured all of these things to a class model where 4 or 5 people were learning it from me at the same time and taking in the information and watching the demonstrations and practicing with me at the same time in a class, I saw a huge spike in the results that I was seeing, which was surprising because when I first created classes, I thought, well, this probably is not going to be nearly as good as private tutoring, but it's kind of my only option to reach the people that I need to be able to reach. Long story short, it takes a lot of getting used to go from private tutoring to classes, although all of the things that I said and all of the examples I used and all the demonstrations and the practice, those were all the same. It was surprising how similar a class lecture was to a tutoring lecture. But there was some adjustment. There was a lot of adjustment, and I perfected that class model. But eventually I realized that most of my students were wanting to have a recorded version of what I was doing for a lot of reasons. The biggest being then they could do their classes at any time that made sense for them, not just during the hours that I was lecturing, because a recorded class can just be accessed anytime as long as you've bought that class, you have ultimate access to it. A lot of students found that they wanted to be able to replay a class or replay a part of a class or watch it again much, much later in their process. That was not an option with private tutoring. That was not an option with live classes. And it worked better for most students. It also allowed people to do it in order. Because there is kind of, you'll hear me say sometimes in the classes that it doesn't exactly matter what order you're going in because they're all independent. And as much as that is true, if you could do them in order, in the best, most optimal possible order, that would certainly be ideal versus dropping into them in random order and everybody doing it in a different order. And so long story made shortish, but still long, I guess. What I use now is totally what I call on demand. You can access your classes from pretty much anywhere you can access YouTube or Vimeo. And you can do them when they really make sense and they really fit into your schedule, when you truly can have 2 hours of focused, quiet time. You can do a class. And that is huge because one of the things that happens with tutoring or with live classes is inevitably you're in a bad mood one day and it's not the best day to learn, anatomy, or you're in a rush to get to the lesson because it's scheduled at a certain time. And maybe one of us runs late. I know I ran late all the time because I was so busy. Or we both arrive on time, but neither of us is quite exactly perfectly on our game because we're both very, very busy and we shook everything up to make this time frame happen so that we could tutor. And so the on-demand program avoids all of the logistical issues that can come into play, like today's not the best day. I thought it was, but I woke up and my kid was sick or whatever, all the things that can come up in a day. And it allows you to say, I truly have 2 hours right now. I have private, quiet time. I can truly focus right now. I'm in the mood to focus right now. I'm not having to worry about other things that I need to do right now. Right now is when I want to take a class. And if a distraction actually comes up during the class, if you have kids, you certainly will have that happen, I'm sure. You can pause it because I'm not live on the other end. And you can pause it, you can back it up. If there's a 10-minute segment of lecture that you were like, whoa, that was harder than the last 10 minutes, you could back up to the beginning of that 10 minutes again, either right there on the spot as soon as you hear it, or later at the end of the class. And the really cool thing about this, where I say I accidentally stumbled on this revelation about how to prepare for the TEAS and the HESI, is the quality of the materials, the quality of the lecture, the quality of the learning process, the way that it works is 100%. So there's no decrease in quality, and there's certainly no decrease in results. In fact, there's been an increase in results doing it this way. But you get all of the built-in convenience of having your own schedule that you can work on. Where I sometimes see confusion is I call this on demand and I call this self-scheduled because every single class is a video with a matching packet that goes with the video. It is a video, but it is interactive. So you will have a printed packet in front of you that goes with that video. You'll print it and set it in front of you before you start the video. You'll start up the video. At first, we will discuss all of the important information about whatever subject the video covers. Then you will do certain exercises. After I do some demonstration with the examples, you will do some of the exercises or the questions with me. You'll either be pausing the video or the video will have a pause that's built into it. And you will interactively go through all of the lecture components, the examples, and some of the practice. And when you finish the class, classes run about an hour and a half as far as the video component that you have to be sitting and watching. And once you finish that hour and a half, you are pretty good at the strategy. Whatever strategy was taught in that class, there's a strategy in every single class. As soon as you get the video done, as soon as it stops playing, you're ready to take that strategy that you've now gotten pretty close to perfecting, and you're ready to apply it to the rest of the practice that's in that same packet that's designed for you to get more practice. And that will help you make sure you totally have the strategy down, you totally have the strategy memorized, and that you're getting really, really good at it. And essentially, the program cycles through all of the different types of things that can be on the test, all of the different difficulty levels that you can see those things in, all the variations they can be in. And you get to learn about, master a strategy for, see examples for, and then practice every single one of those items at every single one of the different difficulties. So it is what you would call completely comprehensive. The lecture quality is fabulous because I don't put a lecture into the recorded library unless it's the best lecture it can be. It's the best version of the way that I explain that material. There's no off days and on days for me anymore because I record my best day, and that's the one that you're going to be sent. And then you're able to still interact with it, but you're able to gain benefit from the fact that some of you have a really short time frame. You can fly through these as quickly as you want because it's not a matter of me having any time. It's just a matter of you figuring out how to do your orders and how to make your schedule work. And if you're totally busy on Thursday, but then suddenly 2 hours frees up out of nowhere, you can instantly decide, hey, I'm going to use this 2 hours to take a class. And you can take a class and do the homework that goes with that class with zero notice, on the spot at any time that you wish, on any day that you wish, and you can blend that into your schedule while still knowing you are going to hear exactly what you need to hear. You're going to see all the examples you should see. You're going to practice the best possible exercises you can practice. And these classes are designed meticulously. So everything from what I discuss to the order that I go in or the way that I blend things into the different classes, and all the way down to the language that I use and the style that I speak in is all very much specific to your exam rather than generic. So when you pick up a book and you try to study math on your own, you're studying a tone that's whatever that writer's tone is, rather than studying a tone that's going to match the tone of the test you're actually trying to study for. So when I put these together, my thought process is we always start out with a strategy. We discuss what to expect, how to recognize a question type, each and every question type, what the variations are, how to recognize those, what the difficulty levels are, and then we practice from basic all the way to whatever the most advanced version of that is, everything in between. And essentially what this means is in 2 hours, you can absolutely, and I shouldn't even say can, I should say will, absolutely master whatever that class was about. And that means you're ready to cross that class off, go on to whatever your next class is, and every time you can set aside 2 hours, print up a packet, watch the video and work along with me, and then finish up that packet, you've mastered another segment of the test. Needless to say, especially if you've seen your test before, you've attempted it before, there's a lot of those sections, so there's a lot of classes. And again, with tutoring, that creates a logistical issue because you have to meet so many times to get to all those different areas of the test. The classes, that's true as well, except you're not having to meet, so you're not having to plan ahead and schedule ahead and try to work the time in and wiggle your schedule around. Wherever you can find 2 hours, as long as it's quiet and it's focused time and you were able to get the packet in front of you beforehand, that's going to effectively teach you what you need to be taught for that segment. The consult process is inherently, because most people don't picture an on-demand video structured program, they picture private tutoring in a different way. So obviously you need to know that that's what it looks like and a little bit of why it looks that way. And you need to know that the quality is the highest of anything that you could possibly do. And then the next stage, I guess, so once you kind of have a good idea of what the structure looks like, what you're going to be doing, then you have a couple of decisions to make, and that's the other crucial part of the consult process, is we will choose a plan. And we will choose a plan right up front, right from the beginning. And we will choose that plan based on a few things. Some of you have a test date that is already set. You have to test on a certain day, or you can't reschedule your test and you've scheduled it for a certain day. And some of you don't. So when I get my list of answers back from the questions, I would say it's probably 50-50 people who say, I would like to test by August, but nothing is set up yet, versus my test is scheduled in 1 week, and here's the date and time that it's scheduled. Obviously, as you're sitting here listening to this, you know which of those two classifications you fit in. If you have a set time frame, what we need to do is determine, can we get you through everything, which of course only applies if you have a super, super short time frame. If your time frame is set, but it's a month or 2 months or 3 months, you can definitely get through everything. If it's a week, you certainly can get through everything, but it kind of would require that everything else in your world is able to move out of the way. And so ultimately we need to decide which set of classes are you going to do. There's optimal, which is everything. There's reduced, which is where we try to take a few things off your plate, and we do that to try to control what you miss if you have to miss something. And there's minimal, which would be for somebody with a very short time frame and a very busy schedule or very big budget restriction in that short time frame, to where we're basically gonna try to get you the big stuff as much as we can, but we're gonna cut out a lot of the things because we just can't do it. You may or may not see in your packet that has your plans, you may or may not see reduced and minimal plans. If you have an open time frame, or if you have a decently long time frame that's 1 month or longer, you probably won't. You probably don't see reduced or minimal. You probably see that everything is optimal. The other difference in plans would be the time frames. So some of you have a time frame that's set, and if that is the case, you probably don't have other time frames shown, unless I think your time frame is a little bit risky, and maybe I include a plan and say, just FYI, if you shoot for the next application date, here's what it might look like instead of this really crammed and condensed plan. If you don't have a date set, or you have a date set that's in 1 month, 2 months, or 3 months, you will see that there's kind of different paces that you can move at. And those are the big two key differences. Some of you will see plans that have different test dates, and you will choose a test date up front. And you're not saying, oh, I promise you I will test on May 1st, I promise. You're just saying, I'm going to shoot for being ready by May 1st, and that's going to dictate your pace, which is why we choose a plan up front. So before you start the program, we want to know, what classes are you going to take in total? What is your overall class plan? When do you want to have them all done by, at least approximately, which is also when you need to test. We don't want a gap between finishing your classes and taking your exam. A few days is okay. We don't want like 1 month, you fly through the classes in 1 month and then you test an entire month later. That would be really bad. And that's why we make those decisions up front. We decide approximately this is the time frame I want to prepare over, which means I'm going to test approximately this date. And here's the classes that I plan to complete within that time. If you already have a test date set, we kind of get to skip the whole here's the time frame I want to shoot for because we've already got one. And instead, we're focused more on making the decision of what classes are we going to complete. And in both cases, what you will see when you look at your personal packet and you watch your personal video is that there's a set kind of number of activities you need to do per week. The closer your test date is, the more you've got to do each week. And we want to choose a pace that works. And again, you may have a test date that's set, so we might not get to do that by changing the date. We might have to do that by changing what classes you take. Hopefully not. I really strongly recommend taking classes over everything. If there is one thing I have learned, there's two major things I've learned in my time specializing in TEAS and HESI. One of them is there are no shortcuts. Trust me, I am an efficient person. I am a simplistic person. I like things to be clear and simple and straightforward, and I like to do things in the easiest way possible. So I've tried a lot of things to shortcut this process. I've tried a lot of things to get people ready faster or get people ready with less time of actual study, less hours input, less overall cost investment. I've tried to cut everything that I thought maybe you could cut. And let me tell you, every time I tried to cut something, I got the same result. It doesn't work. So cutting out classes off the list is not recommended. The other thing that I learned is the on-demand, structured, ordered class program is the best way to prepare for the TEAS and HESI. Not the best way for a lot of things in academics. Private tutoring still definitely has its place in a lot of areas. But with certain exams, typically the really hard ones, NCLEX, MCAT, TEAS, HESI, there is a lecture system that is required. There's a lot of things I need to say to you, and putting those in a structured, careful order and sequence and pace and construction is the key to success. Those are my two learnings. We don't have many corners that we can cut without a huge risk, and this is the format that works the best. You already know you're going to do this format. That's not something that you have to worry about. That's just something I've discovered over my years of trying to do this. The shortcutting component is, and you'll see it all over everything that I send you in the emails. You'll see it. You might hear it in your personal video again. You'll definitely see it on the plans. Anytime I send out a plan that has anything taken off the class list, there's warnings and disclosures all over the place, all over the plan, saying this is not the best way to do it, to cut things out. But that said, and I'm only going to speak to those who do have a short time frame, if we know or very strongly suspect up front that we can't get everything done, and that's unfortunately one of the realities, there are going to be situations where you have a week or 2 weeks and either you don't have enough time that you can make in your schedule to get through everything, or you don't have enough in your budget to do it that quickly, to make that big of a payment that quickly. If that is the case, if I am talking to you, we want to make cuts to the class list. If they're going to be cut, we want to do that up front. And we want to do that as strategically as possible. And when we say we, I'm really saying I do that, and then I present that to you so that you can see what that looks like. But I try to cut the lowest point ratio classes first, the ones that have the smaller quantities of questions on the test, or the ones that have simpler questions on the test versus the ones that are super hard. And so I base those reductions on primarily how many questions you're going to get over the stuff that was in that class, but also on the things that are most subjective on your exam, which I guess you could describe subjective in this context as your answer is very HESI specific or very TEAS specific. I try not to cut classes that you need to know about something like that. So like in T's, I try really hard not to cut much reading, because you really need to know not just how to do all these things and what to expect. You also need to know how that writer chooses the right answer, because it is kind of subjective and or it's kind of T's specific. Minimal plans, same kind of thing, but I cut even more and they're even more dangerous. So anytime we cut out classes, obviously we risk points. And the more that we cut out, the more that we risk. However, again, if that is the situation we're in and we know that up front, we want to be honest with ourselves that it's not going to be feasible to do everything, because then we can try to at least control what gets missed, instead of you just kind of not making it to the end of the plan and then you miss some really important stuff, because some of the last 10 classes are some of the most critical in the entire program. The classes are put in a very careful order. Everything about the classes is thought out. One of those things is you do the classes in a certain subject order. And that's why we have to do reduced and minimal, is we can't just cut off the end of the plan, because the plan is randomized based on the way your brain works and the way learning the sequence works, not based on priority. So some of your most important classes are mixed into the middle. Some of your least important classes are right next to some of your most important. From here, you will move on to your personal video. It will be discussed how I made your plans, why I made them that way, and what kind of factors you need to consider to make your decision about your plan. From here, basically, once you have done your personal video, this video is designed for anything that I say to everybody or would hope to say to everybody. So I'm going to do just a teeny bit of information about where you go from here. But your personal video kind of inserts right here, because we're talking about the planning process and the choosing of a plan. Keep listening. It'll be fine to hear it in this order. But after this, make sure that you watch your personal video. Once you have chosen a plan, all of you were sent different types of plans, different test dates, different everything based on your situation. And hopefully within what you were sent in the first send, you do find something you think is going to work right as far as scheduling or cost or pace or whatever else, test date. And once you've made that decision, you're ready to order your classes. So what's cool about this design is you're essentially, from a technical standpoint, you are purchasing a physical item. You're purchasing a class times however many classes are on your plan. And that means that essentially once you're ready to go, you've watched this video, you've read through the info, you've watched your personal video, and you've chosen a plan, you're ready to request classes. And I have myself as well as a specific assistant who is a request assistant. So I employ somebody who handles, hey, I'm ready for these classes. And within 24 hours, absolute max of sending us, one of us, both of us, we monitor the same inbox, a message with a request, as long as you include everything in the request that needs to be included. Within 24 hours, absolute max, probably within 8 to 10 hours, you will have whatever you requested. There's two ways you could have requested your material. You can request weekly. So you can say, I'm going to do, plan 2 or plan 3, whatever you choose. And you can say, I'm going to do my payments weekly. And if you do it that way, each week you're going to pay for and then in turn receive the classes that are supposed to be done in the upcoming week. Once the upcoming week comes and goes and you finish up those classes, you send a new request, and you send a request every single week saying, hey, I'm ready for this week's classes. I'm ready for this week's classes. You need to include the number of the week, which is included on the plan. You need to always pretty please include your plan number. Because if my assistant is the one who is processing the request, she doesn't have a way to know whether you chose plan 1, 2, 3, or 4. So in every request, you want to include your first and last name, especially if it does not post on your email, your plan number, your week number, and it really helps to avoid any potential confusion if you can list the names of the classes that you see in the week that you're requesting. So if you said, this is Emily Smith, I'm requesting week 2 classes, I'm on plan 1, so week 2 is reading 3, 4, and 5. That is the perfect request email. That gives us everything we need to know so that we can get your classes out quickly. If you're paying through Wyzant, you don't need to do anything additional to what I just said. If you're paying me directly, if you were referred to me or you came to me by some way that was not Wyzant, if you don't know what Wyzant is, I'm talking to you because you don't even know what it is, so you probably didn't come that route. Then you will also need to have sent your payment, and you'll need to include in the email that a payment in blank amount was sent using whichever app you send. That way my assistant knows exactly what you're requesting and that you've paid and how much you paid. You can also purchase everything up front. So if you didn't do it weekly, the other way that you might potentially do it would be to purchase all of your classes up front on day 1. I have a lot of people do that. Right now, I'm around 65%, at least this year, this quarter, 65% do it that way. Totally a personal decision. A lot of my short time frame students do that. So if you only have a week, or even if you have maybe 3 or 4 weeks, you personally will make this decision, but you might feel that it's easier for you if you have all your classes in your inbox. They're all just waiting for you to go and access them. They're all in there from the very first day, and you never have to worry about sending me a request a little too late, and now you're kind of waiting for your next batch of classes because everything in your plan is dropped into your inbox on day 1. In order to do that, you would send me, again, a request email. There is detailed info about how to do this in the info packet. Definitely want to read through the placing an order document before you attempt this. But you'll either say that you're doing it weekly, or you'll say, I'm requesting all of the classes in plan 2 or whatever plan you want to do. And of course, that means you would do one big payment for everything rather than paying weekly. There is an extra discount to do that. I very carefully tread a line with how I do that discount to where I don't do a disservice to people who don't want to do it that way or can't afford to do it all in one payment like that. But I do give a bit of a discount to those who are willing to put all that money up front for their classes. So the discount is small, but makes a good difference in the long run. Certainly saves you some money. The shorter your time frame is, the more that might be something you want to consider doing, because then we don't have an oopsie where you're pacing along really fast, you forget to request your classes, I see your request 12 hours later, and you've lost some time because you were waiting on classes, which can unfortunately easily happen because you got so much on your mind if you're trying to prep that fast. If you're doing 3 classes a week and you're doing this over 3 months, you still might decide that you want to do it up front, and that's totally fine. I can't say that it's always short-term students that do that. Anyone who kind of likes to look at the big picture cost and sees, well, hey, it is less money at the end of it all if I do it this way than if I do it that way. If that's you, if you think big picture and you want to save a little bit in the long run, that's the option for you. If you like to break your payments down, or you need to break your payments down, you're not going to pay a whole bunch more because you're doing it that way. You're not going to get penalized for that. And then you can just do your payments in chunks and your chunk size, the size of the payment chunk, will depend on what plan you choose and how long that plan is going over. Definitely make sure to consult the info packet. From this point, the very best thing to do absolutely next is to watch your video. If you got one, there are going to be times, I should disclose this in this video, that I can't do that because I just don't have the time. It's 1 o'clock in the morning right now, and that's usually when I find time to do consults because I am just busy all day. If you did not receive another video, then your kind of recommendations and plan walkthroughs are in the email, in the body of the email, and in the kind of box notes that are on your plans. So the next thing you want to do is open up the plans document, which will probably have just a weird file name that says CCF and probably today's or yesterday's date. Look through that a bit. There are definitely notations on there that tell you what you're looking at. And then read through the email. If you do have a personal video, it's right underneath this video in your email. And you can immediately look at your plans, pull those up, print them out if you like to print things out like I do. And immediately you can watch that video. Either way, once you get your plans kind of understood, make sure that you read the important info packet. It's a ton of info. Honestly, you probably have to read it more than once to fully comprehend it. It helps to have done all your videos and your personal recommendations and glanced at your plans and all of that. When you go to place an order, specifically read the placing an order document. There's also things in there that are my communication policy, and several other policies that I have that go along with my program that protect you and protect me. When you go to place an order, you are agreeing to the terms that are in the packet. So if you have not read the packet, you might accidentally be agreeing to something you're not okay with. I don't have any crazy, ridiculous policies or anything. But there are certain policies. I have an exclusivity policy that says you can't have another tutor if you're in the program. I have a communication policy that says, hey, you might wait 24 hours for your classes to come out, and you might wait a week for some of your clarifications if you've got a bunch of clarifications from your classes to come out, and where to send those and all that. And you want to make sure you've read that and you're okay with exactly how the structure is going to work before you send me money. So watch your personal video from here, or read your personal email and your plans, or both, and then read through the info packet. You can place your order as soon as you know what plan you want. I have no problem with you just reading the placing an order document, getting the order sent, then going back and reading the rest. Just make sure you get a chance to read everything in that info packet before you end up starting your classes, so that you're okay with everything, you agree with everything, and you're sure that this is going to make sense. I can't imagine it won't, but there's lots of stuff in there that can ensure you get the most out of your money and that you do everything in the best possible way. So I will see you in your personal video, or I will see you in your plans, and I will talk to you soon.